PPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, nearly 2 people, including several children, fell ill after drinking raw milk from a Florida dairy farm. Some were even hospitalized. We break down what we know about the outbreak, as well as the promises and hazards of the wellness fad that celebrates unpasteurized milk. But first, the recent decision by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to claw back $500 million worth of federal vaccine research funding is already having local impacts. Here to discuss it is Dr. Michael Koren, cardiologist and chief executive officer at the Jacksonville Center for Clinical Research. Good morning, Dr. Koren.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
It is nice to have you back. So it's kind of interesting that our 2 lead stories have to do with the official policies and sort of personal preferences of the new HHS Secretary, RFK, and both are sort of having their impacts on the First Coast. I want to ask you, though, about this decision to claw back funding for mRNA research. First of all, just how surprising was this announcement?
It was a total shock. So, just for everybody's knowledge, last Wednesday we got an order from the company that we're working with on a major vaccine study, which is not an mRNA study, by the way. And I'll get to those details in a second. And we were told to stop work on this project, even though we're halfway through the project and we had dozens of people scheduled to be part of the project.
We should probably talk a little bit about the work that your company does, the research.
Sure.
You are a medical research company.
Correct.
You bring people in human trials.
We run clinical trials, yes. We are a group of physicians who run clinical trials in multiple specialties. And we have wonderful volunteers. We've worked with thousands of people here in Northeast Florida on multiple different studies. And some of them are medication studies, some of them are vaccine studies, some of them are what we call biomarker studies for a new lab test, some of them are technology studies. But basically, we're the group that people go to when they want to prove whether or not something works.
Okay. And so you are not necessarily funded directly by the federal government, but you are in some ways researching for companies that may be getting some funding from the federal government.
It's a mixed bag. The majority of our funding comes from private sources, but some either comes directly or indirectly through the government. So, for example, when we were involved in the COVID-19 vaccine studies, we worked with a number of companies that are working on that. Pfizer, working with BioNTech, was all privately funded. Moderna was actually funded through Project Warp Speed, which was government funded.
Okay. And so this announcement, when it came down, did you realize immediately that that the announcement from the HHS secretary was going to impact the work that you do?
Well, I didn't even hear about the proclamation from HHS until after we got the work order. So, or I should say, stop work order.
Yeah.
And so we get a stop work order, and this is right in the middle of your major meeting to make sure that everything is going well in the company. And so, what's going on here? And it was really, really odd. And then we did a little research. We found this news release from HHS saying that they were going to stop funding of mRNA research. And I'm scratching my head, and I said, well, this is not mRNA research. This is different type of vaccine. And then I read this article from HHS, the news release, and it says that they want to focus on next generation technologies to protect people against COVID and other viral illnesses such as influenza. And I'm saying, well, that's what we're doing. Why would you stop the study that's doing exactly what you say that you want to do? So it's a real disconnect.
And so the announcement is covering mRNA vaccines, and the difference is that your specific clinical trial had to do with something that would be the next generation beyond mRNA vaccines.
Correct.
It would be sort of finding a different way to approach
Exactly,
that
to
immunity.
protect people against COVID. And the irony of this is that there's 2 ironies of it, actually. Number one is that this was actually being funded through something called BARDA, which is actually part of the Defense Department. And it's a group that was actually started by George Bush Jr. when there was all this concern about bioterrorism. So this was actually funded because they wanted better vaccine platforms to protect our troops and others against bioterrorism attacks. That's number one irony, is that it's actually having a defense purpose. But the other crazy thing, again, is that this was specifically to get beyond mRNA. And we were actually promoting it, saying that this is a non-mRNA way of protecting yourself against COVID.
So just big picture, the idea that the federal government is sort of ending research dollars into a certain area of science that
Mhm.
the current secretary of HHS has said he's, you know, he's expressed skepticism over, generally speaking, vaccines.
Yes.
And so, can you just sort of characterize what it means for the world of clinical research or science writ large when the government pulls back
Yeah,
wholesale from
sure.
this kind of research?
Well, it's great uncertainty, and there's no internal consistency. So you completely lose confidence, and the government loses credibility. They're not saying that they're against vaccines, by the way. If you actually read what they say they're against the mRNA technology, and they don't want to fund that. They actually say they want to fund other vaccines, but then they don't do it. So it makes you wonder, are they credible at all? Do they really know what's going on? Do they really understand the difference between different vaccines? Do they understand the science of protecting people against viral illnesses? It makes you wonder if they really truly understand all that.
And so, in undermining this area of research, do you think it impacts overall faith in vaccines?
Of course, yeah, it certainly does, which is unfortunate because vaccines are an incredibly important strategy to protect our citizens. And again, this is not to say that there aren't reasons to question what happened with the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. I can get into some details. In fact, we've done that before. But just remind people is that COVID-19 was a devastating illness, particularly in the beginning, against vulnerable people. Younger, healthier people tended to have a relatively mild illness. The flip side of that is that the vaccines had more of a side effect profile in the younger people and actually a relatively benign side effect profile in older people. So a reasonable strategy would have been to just say, okay, older, more vulnerable people get the vaccine, younger, healthier people probably don't need it. But instead, what happened is that everybody's either for the vaccine or against it, not putting into the context of who the people are we're trying to protect.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with clinical researcher Dr. Michael Koren about the impact of canceled federal funding for ongoing clinical trials. If you have a question or comment, you can join our conversation at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So right now there are, I think, my understanding is there's 3 FDA-approved mRNA vaccines. There's 2 for COVID and 1 for RSV, which is a
Respiratory syncytial virus, yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
Um, and so I guess the promise of these vaccines is that they can be made quickly.
This is Nobel Prize winning technology. These are products that have been shown to be safe and effective in studies of tens and tens and tens of thousands of people. We have had thousands, let's say 2,000 people that have been exposed to these vaccines here in Florida within my company. So I have very good firsthand knowledge that these are incredibly well tolerated products. Yet, for whatever reason, there's this vendetta against this particular idea. To your point, the beauty of a messenger RNA vaccine is that it can be made very quickly, and it doesn't require killing viruses or doing things to inactivate viruses, which is a long process, which also introduces a lot of impurities. So mRNA is really elegant because you basically take the little gene sequence that causes the problem, you make a relatively small molecule that elicits an immune response, like the spike protein, and then boom, you can do this within weeks rather than years. And so, with that in mind, and the fact that these are really pure substances, theoretically, it should be a fabulous technology. Now, having said that, when you elicit immune response, there's always going to be a little bit of uncertainty. And for example, one of the things that came up was that younger people who got the COVID-19 vaccine were more likely to get inflammatory conditions such as pericarditis, but they were self-limited. And that's part of the learning of all these things. So maybe younger people who have a more intense immune response get a lower dose. And that's how we learn it in medicine. But instead, the response has been to just sort of shut down this incredibly important avenue of research.
It has been used in testing now for, I mean, for a variety of things other than respiratory illnesses or things like COVID. I mean, there are people who are using it to
For
research
cancer, yeah,
cancer.
there's many, many implications and applications of this technology, some of which we've been involved with. Not all of them work. There have been other areas where we've decided, when we say we, there's the scientific community, has decided that they probably don't work well enough. But the technology itself, again, is Nobel Prize winning. It's very precise. It is actually responsible for 3 products on the market. And by the way, there's only 3 COVID-19 vaccines that are approved in the US, and 2 of them are mRNA. The other one being Novavax, which is a small protein that is also given to patients. So it's not a virus that's been inactivated, such as the Johnson & Johnson or the AstraZeneca vaccines, which are not available right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying that the Johnson& Johnson vaccine was a more traditional type of vaccine. It
Right.
wasn't an mRNA,
And it
and it
didn't work as well.
ultimately created some serious health impacts, and they
Well, it didn't,
stopped manufacturing
they
it.
stopped manufacturing because it couldn't compete. It didn't work as well.
Yeah, but it didn't also create some blood clotting issues? Or yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. Your
Yeah.
memory is excellent. Yes.
And so what does it mean for, these areas of research, whether it's autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular diseases, which is your specialty, diabetes, even things like cystic fibrosis, where there was some promise that mRNA vaccines is this research going to continue without
Yeah,
government funding?
a very important question. So it can continue without government funding. So fortunately, some of the companies that are involved in this are well heeled. They have money for research. As I mentioned, even for the COVID-19, Pfizer, which is a big established company, self-funded all their research, whereas Moderna used government money. So I think it will still move forward, but there are a lot of startup companies that may not be able to participate now without the government help. And there are different ways of using this technology that may not get explored because there's no government funding for more entrepreneurial type of companies that may want to take a little bit different types of risk when understanding health issues compared to the big pharmaceutical houses.
And we do know just from, what history has taught us that pharmaceutical companies tend to pursue things that will make money for
Of
them,
course.
not necessarily tackle the diseases that would be otherwise prioritized if they don't think
Yeah,
that there's a profit in
yeah,
there.
it's a really interesting point that is probably not well understood. Is yes, drug companies are in it to make the money. There's no question about that, and that's fine as long as they provide benefit and they provide safe products. I'm all for that. But the way it actually works, Ann, is that those big companies are always looking at the small companies that are trying new things. And if a small company tries a new thing and it works, then they're going to invest in that company. So there's a lot of investment that goes from the big pharmaceutical companies to these small companies. And that was also a role for government to look at things that were sort of cutting edge and getting it going enough where commercial interests would then get comfortable funding the rest of the research.
And so we know that there has also been a lot of pullback of funding at places that do direct federal research, like NIH.
Mhm.
Um, Earlier this year, there was pullback from research that was being done into the bird flu,
You know,
and a possible vaccine for that. I know that there have been some people in the world of infectious disease research that have said that this decision is reckless.
it's horrible.
Um, in fact, the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research at the University of Minnesota said on the PBS NewsHour last week, he said it was, quote, unequivocally the most dangerous public health decision I have ever seen made by a government body. Do you think that that's hyperbolic? Do you think that's true?
Well, I haven't studied all the decisions that the government made over the course of time. There may have been worse ones.
We should say this guy served under 7 presidents, so
So
he's looking at it
yeah,
with a little bit
it
of
may
a
be slightly hyperbolic. I don't know, but I will say it's not a good decision in my opinion. And and so public health is one thing, but this research funding is also good for business. These are American companies developing American technologies that are protecting the world. Uh, Pfizer and Moderna sold incredible numbers of vaccines all around the world. And if you went to places like China or India, they had lots of options, by the way. People don't realize that there was 140 COVID-19 vaccines available around the world that were registered with the WHO. But everybody acknowledged that the mRNAs were the best. So people who can afford it in India or China and other parts of the world would get the mRNA vaccines, thinking that this American technology was the best. And here we are pulling money out from developing these new technologies. So it doesn't, for a business-oriented president, it doesn't make sense to pull this away from the biomedical business.
on what level does it make sense?
Um, it 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 doesn't. I wish I could come up with something. I always like to look at both sides of the story, but I think it's purely political. I think it's purely political, and it's feeding into a notion that there's money wasted. Of course, biomedical research is not the most efficient process in the world. We certainly learn. We every experiment doesn't turn out the way we think, and that's how we learn. And we have a great system where we learn without putting the public at harm because we have such great vigilance systems and we have such great ways of evaluating these technologies even before a patient touches them with animals, et cetera. So we have all those things in place, but it's never going to be perfect. It's not the perfectly efficient process. So if you argue that this is protecting against government waste, well, you could probably find an anecdote or two where that might be the case, but the overall picture just doesn't fly together because, in fact, There's so many examples of where just the seed money is resulting in these incredible technologies. And again, MRA is an incredible success story. Operation Warp Speed, which of course was the one of the crowning achievements of the first Trump administration, is now not even being discussed by the second Trump administration, which seems so odd to me.
We have an email from Ricardo. He says demonizing vaccine science led to the CDC shooting last week. We have to stop the irresponsible, crazy rhetoric. Of course, there was someone who was shooting at the CDC building. Very scary for the people who've been working in there. I think a lot of the people who work at the CDC feel targeted in other
Sure.
ways, just between broadsides about the research that is being done at the federal level, cutbacks, other things. Um, do you think that this is going to cost lives?
Again, I don't know enough about it, but I will say that people who commit these crimes typically are mentally ill,
Oh,
and they'll find one reason or another to rationalize their mental illness.
I should be clear.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean more the decision to pull back on the vaccine research,
Yes.
like the bird flu, or this.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons why you can kind of get away with it in the short term is that it's hard to quantify these things because a lot of these technologies will be doing good many years down the road. So getting back to the messenger RNA technology, which I know quite a bit about since I was so involved with the COVID-19 development projects. This was based on government research that was put forth 20 years ago. So it turns out that one of my college classmates named Drew Weissman won the Nobel Prize for this technology. And so I've known him literally since second year biology in college. So that's how I know him. And so he had a government grant to work on messenger RNA actually for HIV purposes. And it turned out that they developed this technology. He connected with a PhD from Hungary named Dr. Kariko, and the two of them together developed this idea that you had to change the base pairs in messenger RNA to make it effective for the vaccines. But they had no idea it was going to help people with COVID. This was developed 20 years before COVID even hit us. So having these technologies available is so unpredictable. And so to answer your question is we don't know when and how this will protect us, but at some point it probably will.
And having that technology advance to the next level could possibly be saving lives.
Exactly.
Um, I want to ask you a little bit because before the show, we were just talking about the ethics of running a clinical trial like this. What you have, in place in terms of the obligations you have to your patients, what they're told. I'm just curious. First of all, how you feel that this announcement is impinging on that,
Sure.
that
Well, I
you
can be
provide.
very explicit. So, in this study that was just put on hold, again, by the way, we're still trying to get it back up and going, but it was put on hold after 5,000 people around the country were already enrolled, and there was another 5,000 that were being recruited. So, when we recruit patients for the study, we recruit them months in advance, and we tell them this is what to expect during the study. In this case, we're comparing a technology developed by a company called Vaxart, which presents the COVID-19 antigen to the mucosal lining of the stomach versus the mRNAs. So everybody in this particular study would get some protection against COVID, one versus the other.
And the mRNAs are injected,
Correct.
and the drug that you're testing would
Is
be
oral. It's a
oral.
pill. That's
Okay.
correct.
And is not mRNA.
That's correct.
Okay.
So their goal was to promote the next generation, and there may be some theoretical advantages for using a oral vaccine, like the oral polio vaccines, for example. Is you're presenting the antigen or the protein that elicits the immune response to a mucosal surface rather than to a muscle. And not to get too nerdy here, but there are different antibodies, and some antibodies work at the level of the mucosa, and others work in the bloodstream.
Okay.
So there's super interesting science behind this. So again, getting back to the patients, we're telling people, okay, don't get your usual vaccine. We're going to provide that for you. So we got that covered for you. You're going to come in. We have an enrollment period of say 2 or 3 months in preparation for the cold and flu season. So now is the time we enroll people so they're protected in October through February, and it's all by design, all by plan. And they said, great, 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 great. So we get a bunch of people, literally a couple hundred people that have agreed to do this.
That's right here on the First
Yeah,
Coast.
absolutely. And so we put them into the studies already. I think we've put in a little bit over 100 when we got the hold order. And we had another 100 in the queue. And then we have to say, oh, well, sorry, but this whole plan that we came up with over the last several months is now put on hold, and we don't know if it's going to be overcome by some other government order that comes down the road in a week, which, by the way, already happened in this study. I mentioned to you off air that in February, as we're getting ready for the study, we got word that the government was going to put it on hold because of Doge. And we figured that this would not happen. Then we get a call in May saying, "Oh, the study's up and going. BARDA has looked at this." Again, the Defense Department has looked at this and has actually prioritized this study. Again, money is not coming directly from HHS. This is coming from BARDA, from the Defense Department. And so all these agencies in the government are giving us these mixed signals. And at the end of the day, the poor patient that prepared to get protected against COVID in this program has the rug pulled out from under him or her.
And so when it comes to, having someone participate in a study, telling them not to get their traditional COVID vaccine that they might have been planning to get, and then, being in this circumstance, does that kind of fly in the face of just the basic ethics of doing clinical research? I mean,
Absolutely, basic
w
ethics of
and how
healthcare.
so? I mean, help
Well,
explain that.
again, one of our ethical obligations as a physician, as a healthcare provider, is you lay out a plan for a patient, you get their consent, and then it's expected that you follow through on the plan, unless there's a really, really good reason not to, like a safety reason. But if you then present all this, and again, this was all in cooperation with the government and Vaxart and everybody else, and then boom, literally you get an email, literally 5 minutes before somebody's going to show up to get their vaccine, that's completely unethical. It's just wrong.
What about the perspective? I'm just curious in terms of, they have given their time, they have given their bodies in some ways for this research, and some of it's been done. But if nothing happens
Yeah.
and it's sort of all for naught,
That's a great point, and it's a more subtle point that people don't always get, including some healthcare providers. So when these studies are being designed, there are statistical calculations that are done to determine how many patients need to be in the study. So for this particular study, it was 10,000 patients, and that's not a random number. That's based on what we think the possible differences will be between the two elements that we're testing. And if you stop the study at 5,000, the whole study may be for naught because you won't have enough data to prove the point one way or another. So all that effort that was put in by these volunteers, and some people are motivated by just being part of the scientific process, not anything else. That is taken away from all these people because we don't have enough data to actually prove the hypothesis one way or another.
we have an email from Andrew. He says, not sure the surprise about all this. Once anti-vaxxer RFK Jr. endorsed Trump, it was clear where things were going to go. My question, does this mean that flu and COVID vaccines won't be available at all or that they won't be supported by insurance?
Well, it's a good question. Obviously, CMS is part of this whole HHS complex.
CMS.
Yes, the Center for it's basically Medicare and Medicaid,
Okay.
Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services or
Okay.
medical services. And sorry for the jargon, but they're also part of this whole complex, and they could decide that the government's not going to compensate for these vaccines, at which point individuals have to pay for them out of pocket. But the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are FDA approved. They are on the market. People can buy them of course, with a prescription. And so that availability won't be necessarily taken away, but the funding of it could be taken away.
So they could be available, but just be much more expensive
Correct.
because your health insurance doesn't cover them. They're not $10. They could be $120.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the price will be, but it'll probably be somewhere between 10 and 120. Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, right at this point, what you're telling your staff,
Mm.
people that may have been hired to handle this research, what you're telling your clinical participants. Are you waiting? Are they on hold? What happens?
It's a great question, and I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't know because the study is still continuing for the 5,000 people, including the 100 plus here in Northeast Florida, but it's stopped for these other people that were in the interim. So, literally, this is a day-to-day adventure in terms of what we can tell people and we can't tell people. I've I've sought out the advice of the company, and they're also confused. They're still trying to get clarity. Again, this hit them like a ton of bricks. They were just literally sent an email that said, "You're going to stop work," and so they're trying to figure it all out. So the answer is that there's a lot of confusion, but what I will say is that we have an ethical obligation that we will fulfill for anybody that has already been in the study. We will make sure that everything that we said we're going to do, we're going to do, whether or not we get paid for it, because we have an ethical obligation to follow through on what we said. As far as the new people, we are beholden to these companies for actually access to the product, and we will not be able to accommodate them, at least in the short term. But we will continue to work towards getting the study back to where it started.
Are you concerned about staff?
I am, but I have a very strong commitment to our staff, and we'll figure out another project to get them involved with to make sure they're staying productive.
It's
And by
just
the way, and also for the patients, a lot of patients do clinical research because they love the process. It's a very nurturing process. We like to talk about research as a care option because you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of support, you get a lot of knowledge through these projects. And for people that aren't able to get involved in this particular project, we can find another one. Fortunately, we're a robust, deep organization that has probably 40 or 50 ongoing projects right now.
we've got a call from Sally in Springfield. Sally, we're going to wrap shortly, but go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my concern and outrage that someone with anti-vaccine beliefs was put in this position and then made this dictate. My opinion is if people don't want to get vaccines, then they should just not get them. But to deprive the rest of us from advancement in science is just wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
I
Sally.
appreciate that.
Well, Dr. Koren, I think we're going to leave it there, but thank you so
Okay.
much for coming in this morning. Good luck with your research. I hope that you're able to
Appreciate
get
it.
it back on track.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Up next, a wellness fad gone bad. We'll discuss the latest on the illness outbreak at a Florida raw milk dairy. Welcome back. An illness outbreak announced last week has put the spotlight on a Northeast Florida dairy farm. A warning from the Department of Health said nearly 24 people were sickened after drinking raw milk from the dairy, including children. Several were hospitalized. Joining us via video to discuss the risks and purported rewards of this wellness fad, we are joined by public health expert Chad Nielsen. He is the director of infection prevention and control at Nemours Children's Health, and he joins us remotely. Thanks for being here, Chad. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Ann.
We also want to hear from you. If you're listening, do you drink raw milk or have you ever tried it? What has your experience been? Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. So, Chad Nielsen, first of all, can you just sort of indicate for us how significant is an outbreak of this size?
Well, when we look at outbreaks, any outbreak of any size really depends on the organisms or what sort of the causative factor is. But what I will tell you is this is an outbreak that is relatively preventable, right? Raw milk has known risks dating back for decades. This didn't have to happen. So to hear that 21 individuals, and I believe it was 6 kids, were involved with this, something that was totally preventable is really unfortunate, and it is sizable. I will say there have been larger raw milk outbreaks out in California and the West Coast, but this is not insignificant because a lot of individuals are harmed by this.
And so Florida is one of about 20 states that does not allow the sale of raw milk for human consumption. In fact, it has to be labeled not for human consumption, as this milk at this particular dairy. And so the people that are buying it are choosing to drink it in spite of that prohibition. But there are about 30 states that do allow the sale of raw milk. Can you indicate what we know about why people are motivated to drink it in the first place? What are the purported benefits?
So I think this really goes back to the 90s and sort of the organic health food movement. And that movement really posits that anything that we're adding to or sort of fiddling with our food is making it unhealthy, right? And I think some of that, in fact, is true. We know that research supports that ultra-processed foods are bad for us, and that the more we limit them, the better it is for our diet and our overall health. And so I think some of that has gone a little haywire in today's social media and other landscapes. And so I think what this idea of raw milk being healthy or more healthy is largely not based in science. It's not based in evidence that's been researched and tested. But what some of those proponents of raw milk are saying is that raw milk is more healthy for you because pasteurization essentially removes nutrients, or it makes nutrients not as, quote, bioavailable. It could help with allergies and sensitivities. All of these claims are popular about raw milk, and unfortunately not many of them have been researched well and shown to be true.
And so pasteurization is what is traditionally the treatment for milk. And as you say, it could, in the claims of people who support raw milk, they believe that it knocks out some of the essential products or qualities of milk that could be beneficial. What does pasteurization do to help control disease, though, when it comes to dairy milk?
So let's talk about what pasteurization is. It's discovered back in the 1860s by Louis Pasteur, and he kind of fell upon it as he was trying to address the problem of spoilage in liquids. During that process of him trying to figure out spoilage in liquids, he recognized, like we do today, that food and beverages can harbor harmful bacteria and viruses and pathogens in other ways. And by pasteurizing it, that is to say, by heating that liquid up to a certain temperature, it essentially renders it safe, and it kills all of the microbes that are in it. So there is a small amount of nutrients that are lost in pasteurization, but it's not enough to overcome the risks of all of the bacteria and potential for viruses that exist in that raw milk. Pasteurization now is really standard practice across most of the modern world. If we didn't have pasteurization, we'd see many more foodborne illnesses in outbreaks and amongst our communities, and they'd be a lot more common because we use pasteurization for nearly everything dairy related, from cheese to ice cream. So it's a very important public health tool to render food that we eat and drink every day safe.
I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of illness that were linked to this outbreak, but I do want to just say, first of all, the farm is that was identified by the Department of Health is in New Smyrna. It's called Keeley Farms Dairy, and they put out a statement that basically said that they were blindsided by the Department of Health announcement, that they had not been informed of any investigation, and were not contacted by the agency prior to the statement that was issued publicly. They have not been notified. They say that they had, quote, committed any wrongdoing, and they also noted that they do label all of their raw milk as not for human consumption, which is something that they're required by the state to do. But this outbreak was linked to a couple of kinds of bacteria, I guess. The Shiga,
Shigella, yeah.
Shigella, and Campylobacter. Campylobacter. Is that? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay. So, I mean, those are both illnesses that can produce really violent responses in people who've had them in a gastrointestinal sense. Can you sort of just let us know what it is that they are responsible for? And then beyond that, if we're talking about severe complications, which I guess at least a couple of these people had, what that can bring.
Right. So when we look at the risks of raw milk, we frequently talk about bacteria. And some of those bacteria, as you alluded to, Campylobacter, E. coli, or what we call Shiga toxin producing E. coli. So it's sort of a toxin that certain strains of E. coli have. These bacteria and their toxins cause gastrointestinal illness, much like what you hear about on cruise ships or sort of other sort of gastrointestinal illness outbreaks, right? You're talking about vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramping, things of those nature that, generally speaking, in most individuals, they can fight off and overcome. Maybe sometimes they need antibiotics to help them. But in really severe cases, particularly amongst those who may not have good immune systems, children, pregnant women, those types of bacteria can become extremely dangerous and really increase their risk at hospitalization. Because if you can't clear these bacteria from your GI tract or your system without antibiotics or even with, you can end up in the hospital with more severe complications, which could lead to all sorts of issues. We're talking surgical intervention on your guts, your intestines, the potential for septic shock, all sorts of really negative health outcomes can be found if this is a very invasive case of these bacteria that you have.
If you're just joining us, we were talking about the recent raw milk disease outbreak linked to a dairy here in Northeast Florida. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We've got a call from Carolina on the south side. Good morning. Go ahead.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Hi, good morning. I'm a physician in town. Thank you for taking my call. But I often get questions about, is it safe to have raw milk, especially for children? And I recommend not. And if they do buy raw milk, I tell them to scald it at least. The progress that we've made with pasteurization and in science is just so under attack. And physicians have an obligation to do no harm and to do good, but the people that post these things or share this information online have absolutely no responsibility to anyone getting sick, and they don't answer the call at 3 a.m. when someone is ill. So it's very frustrating, and it makes me so angry to see that people are hospitalized because of the inadequacies of ethics in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Chad, there obviously is that element to this. A lot of social media influencers making all kinds of health recommendations these days. And, raw milk is one of those that you'll find a lot on TikTok. Of course, you'll also find, as we noted earlier, the Secretary of HHS, RFK Jr., drinking it and advocating for it. So there are people who perhaps don't have any training. And then there's also people in positions of great authority singing its praises.
Yeah, that's right. And what that does is it creates this landscape, as Carolina the caller mentioned, that it confuses the consumers. It confuses the general public when they hear messaging from the government versus their doctors or their nurses at home with conflicting guidance. And so I think it goes back to sort of the previous conversation you had with Dr. Koren in the previous segment, that public health really is under attack. Medicine is under attack. Science is under attack. If people who have these questions really want to think about what is my risk and who do I listen to, nearly every medical and health agency of any kind of authority recommends against certain things, and raw milk is one of them. Right? The CDC and the FDA themselves currently advise do not consume raw milk. The World Health Organization, do not consume raw milk. The American Academy of Pediatrics, do not consume raw milk. So I think it becomes very difficult, for the average everyday consumer, especially those heavily on social media, to understand what is true and what's not. But I will always go back to say, what are the sources? You don't need a graduate level degree in epidemiology or public health or medicine to determine if something sort of smells fishy in the research. I always say, who's benefiting from this? Who's trying to sell you raw milk? Why are they trying to sell it to you? As the caller very explicitly stated, they have no accountability to you, yet they are probably profiting off of the decisions they're trying to encourage you to make.
We've got a call from Tom on the west side. Tom, go ahead. Are you there, Tom? No, perhaps not. Maybe he's on hold still. I want to add, we've been seeing some pictures for people who are watching our live stream of the dairy farm that was linked to this outbreak. They recently posted to their Facebook page a statement from another supporting dairy farm that's located in DeLand. And one thing that farm noted was that this is not, as they believe the media has sort of been reporting, all of a sudden 21 people sickened, but it actually is 21 people sickened since the beginning of the year, since January 1st. I'm curious if that gives you any comfort. And then also the question of kind of what is causing this. The posting also said that they believe this is something stemming from improper storage of raw milk as opposed to something that was inherent in the product when it was sold. I'm just curious your thoughts about both of those things.
So regardless of whether 21 cases were related to a very sudden outbreak or 21 spread over several months, an outbreak is an outbreak when you have an unexpected event in a population over a period of time. And so regardless of the time period, raw milk being the causative agent is dangerous nonetheless. So as it comes to the company or the farm that is sort of pushing back against this, the Florida Department of Health has epidemiologists like myself all over the state of Florida working these cases. And so what they're doing is they're finding reports of certain infectious diseases from hospital records or from calls from consumers saying, hey, look, I got sick with this. And so then those epidemiologists for the state of Florida start sort of unraveling the yarn ball, and they start looking at different things related to what did that person eat, what did they consume, liquid-wise, where have they been, and they put this very complex puzzle together to determine sort of where this pathogen or where this contaminated product came from. I won't pass judgment on this farm. Certainly they are following the law with packaging their products. It's primarily raw milk is provided for the consumption by animals or pets. But I think nonetheless, we know how to do epidemiology here in the state of Florida. The state health department is very good at what they do, as well as their epidemiologists on the regional and the local levels. We have to trust in their guidance when they say this is an outbreak and what steps to follow. Storage of raw milk, depending on how it could be stored, absolutely. It could also amplify the bacteria or the viruses that are in that milk. Along any kind of perishable product, if you're not refrigerating it appropriately, it warms up, giving pathogens the ability to start to grow and reproduce. And so that's why we tell people, it's a joke during the summer, don't leave potato salad out in the sun or don't leave leftovers out, because as that food warms up, it allows bacteria to grow. So is it possible that it was due to storage? Absolutely, possibly, but nonetheless, the consumption of that milk, regardless of where it's from, if it's raw, there is a risk.
We had a comment from Regina in Mandarin saying we all pay when people do this stupid stuff. Chad, just very, very briefly, do you think, given that this is based on reporting from physicians, that this outbreak is larger than 21 people?
So that's a good question. It certainly could be, and I'll tell you why. When we form the idea of an outbreak and we go through all the steps to confirm it, generally speaking, we have to have lab-related results. So someone went to a hospital or a doctor's clinic, they gathered a sample, the sample was positive for this, and then they connect it to food or wherever they got it from.
Chad, we're going to probably have to leave it there. I apologize, but
Sure.
Thank you so much, Chad Nielsen, for joining us today. Really appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank
All
you.
right. We'll be back in just a moment.
The Florida Theater presents The Psychology of Cults, a live event exploring how cults form, why people join, and what it takes to leave. Wednesday, October 8th at 8 p.m. Information at floridatheater.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One text or call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
I'm David McGowan, CEO of WJCT Public Media. You may never have supported WJCT before, and that is okay. But today, I'm asking you to take that first step. With the loss of all federal and state funding, WJCT faces one of the most urgent challenges in our history. The programs you rely on, local news, educational shows for children, emergency alerts, and stories that connect our community, are now sustained entirely by this community's support. If you've ever turned to WJCT for clarity, connection, or comfort, I'm asking you to turn that trust into action. And right now, your first gift will be matched, dollar for dollar, for a limited time. That means your support goes twice as far to protect the future of public media here on the First Coast. Go to wjct.org/sustain. Thank you.
A Texas GOP redistricting plan has Democrats in the state and nationwide fighting back. On the next installment of our politics series, If You Can Keep It, we ask what this early midterm battle means for voters, and we answer your questions about congressional districts. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, students across the First Coast are heading back to school today, have headed back to school, I guess, by this point. But an in-school tutoring assistance program is coping with a significant financial cutback. Here to tell us about it and their hopes to resolve it, I am joined by Alicia Bauman, Senior Vice President and Executive Director of City Year Jacksonville. Good morning, Alicia.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Quentin Griffin, Interim Director of Impact at City Year Jacksonville. Quentin, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So first of all, just tell us what is happening this school year. What's going on with the federal funding cuts as it impacts City Year Jacksonville?
Sure. So we are a national organization. Our headquarters is based out of Boston, and we receive AmeriCorps funding nationally. And several of our locations received a federal cut from AmeriCorps. The larger AmeriCorps funding was cut, and we are one of the largest AmeriCorps funded programs in the country.
And so City Year is the design is actually like the AmeriCorps kind of designed off the Peace Corps model, right? But it's an agency where people go into the schools. They are working to help kids, grow and flourish. It's a tutoring program. Sure. What does this mean, practically speaking, for the schools that you service?
Well, for us in Jacksonville, we're resilient. So we're getting creative with our service and really intentional. So we've had to create a resilient staffing model and stay flat for the most part. So we're not expanding into more schools necessarily. We were able to stay in the number of schools that we receive. We have a really balanced revenue model, so that's helpful for us. We get a lot of community support, school district support, city support, public, private. So it's balanced, but it does mean we're limited in the expansion efforts. But we're trying to get creative.
Yeah. And Quentin, you're now director of the Impact at City Year program, but you also went to a school that was a City Year school, and then you also did work as a City Year what do you call that?
Student success
coach.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that evolution.
For sure, yeah. So I was a student at Ed White High School. I graduated in 2010. And at the time, actually, we didn't have City Year at the school, but then later City Year did become a part of Ed White High School. And I joined not knowing that, but when I joined City Year, they placed me back at Ed White High School.
Oh,
and that
fun.
was a really good opportunity to connect with students, because I was like, I used to go here, and immediately that was a bridge that I was able to make with those students. And 10 years later, I'm still working for City Year.
Yeah. And so right now, City Year is not in a high school locally. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. But we did just enter into middle schools again this year. So we're serving at Landmark Middle School and Westside Middle School as well.
And is there a sense as to kind of where the most need is, whether it's, K through 5 or middle school or high school?
Every kid could use our support. That's from my experience. I worked on all 3 levels now, and I see the benefit of our student success coaches on each level, really helping kids find their voice when they are going through their education, taking control of their education as well, and just making those right decisions throughout the day. It works on all 3 levels.
Yeah, it's beautiful because our young people are in schools before school starts until after school ends. They're there 50 hours a week, and our model can service elementary, middle, and high school. It's based off of kind of partnership with our school district and where they see we could help fill the most gaps.
And so how did they, and when it comes to a school, like if you were in Ed White and then you're not in Ed White, what is happening there? Is that a district decision? Is that a funding decision?
It's based off of sort of the idea is that we're not there forever, but that we're helping to bridge some gaps.
Okay.
And so if a school gets to a good place, then maybe we can move on and help another school. And so we partner really closely with our district leadership to determine what those schools are from year to year.
So given this funding situation that you're in right now, I mean, what is it that you are asking either of the school district or the schools themselves or the parents or the community?
Well, I think from a community standpoint, if anybody was sort of watching at the end of the last school year, we had a match campaign that was really, really successful. And so we exceeded our match campaign, which helped us bridge funding gaps really beautifully. So I would say from a community standpoint, there is no amount that is not helpful.
Mhm.
Any way that we, from a funding standpoint, any amount is helpful. And then just learning about not only our work, but the incredible work of the school district that's happening locally and how to get plugged into schools, I think is a beautiful way.
And Quentin, just based on your own experience, would you encourage people to get involved in City or Jacksonville? I mean, has it been a good
Absolutely.
experience for you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a young person between the ages of 18 and 25, that's like the range that we will hire a student success coach. Absolutely. It's a wonderful program, teaches you a lot of life skills, but also you get to like find passion in the work that you do.
And what
Um,
kind of skill set do those kids need when they're coming to join the program?
a lot of them, they're either fresh out of high school or maybe they're doing a gap year for college, or maybe they just finished college and they want to start their career. They learn. We have a multitude of things that we do, but they learn skills for like workforce development. We have pathways that they can go into if they want to get into teaching, if they want to remain inside of a nonprofit sphere. There's a lot of things that they can do.
At a baseline, I think a young person coming in with a heart to service is number
Yes.
one, and
Yep.
we teach them how to do everything else.
Yep.
And you get some money for school too when you're done.
Yep.
So
All right. Well, Alicia Bauman, Quentin Griffin, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Good luck with all your work.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
All right. And thank you for listening. Join us tomorrow when we ask Mayor Donna Deegan how she's bracing for the budget battle as the city council takes aim at her community health priorities. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. MedEvidence and WJCT present Is It Allergies, COVID, or Something Else? A free lunch and learn August 15th at WJCT Studios. Join Drs. Charles Green and Mitchell Rothstein to explore the causes of sudden loss of smell or taste. Registration at wjct.org/events.